Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. We're here to talk about small business policy priorities in the wake of the 2020 election. Timing could not be better given the events of the weekend. Thanks to the power of patiently counting votes and to math, we have a president and vice president-elect. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tammy Halevi, and I am delighted to have so many people on the line for this important and timely and exciting conversation. Today's conversation is presented by Reimagine Main Street, an initiative of public-private strategies. Reimagine Main Street is a multi-stakeholder private sector initiative focused on advancing and uplifting innovative solutions to ensure that Main Street is at the center of a post-COVID recovery. The goal of our work is to ensure that small business owners and the people who work for them in every community rebound, thrive, and contribute to an inclusive recovery. This is our first public event, and we could not be more excited. Our intent is to promote a thoughtful dialogue and lively debate about policy priorities for small business in this new administration. We are delighted and honored to be presenting this session in partnership with Blavity. Welcome to those of you who are watching us through the Blavity live stream, in addition to those of you who are with us via the Zoom. Before we hop into the meat of the conversation, a couple of pieces of housekeeping. First, we'll be recording the session and we will make it available after the event. Second, we're eager to hear for this session to be interactive and to hear from each of you. So please chat your questions for the moderator throughout the course of the conversation. It is now my great pleasure to welcome Maneet Ahuja, who will be moderating today's conversation. Maneet is a senior editor at Forbes, where she covers business and entrepreneurship. We could not have asked for anyone better to lead this conversation with our terrific panelists. Welcome, Maneet, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy, for the introduction, and thank you to Public-Private Strategies and Rhett for your generous invitation. So as you mentioned, this discussion comes at a very important time for our nation. We've just elected our new president in the midst of a pandemic. At the same time, COVID cases are skyrocketing, and America's more than 30 million small businesses are continuing to suffer. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome an all-star panel of industry leaders and experts to help us get down to the brass tacks, which is helping advance a set of high-impact policy priorities for small business in the wake of the current crisis. Joining us is Marie Johns, former Deputy Administrator of the Small Business Administration and now CEO of PPC-Leftwich. In her Senate-confirmed role, she was responsible for management of the nearly $1 billion agency and development of SBA programs and policies. We're also joined by Luz Urrutia, CEO of Accion Opportunity Fund. Luz leads the largest nonprofit small business lender in the United States, with over 100 million in small business loans under management. She also serves on the advisory board of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Consumer Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve. We're also joined by Jason Wiens, Policy Director of Entrepreneurship for the Ewing, Marion, Kauffman Foundation. Thank you all for joining us. One quick note to second Tammy, our goal is to make this forum as interactive as possible. So please, I encourage all of the participants to please send in your questions. We've set aside a good chunk of time at the end to get to the issues that you feel are most important. Okay, let's jump right in. The first question is to the whole panel. What are your thoughts on the election outcome and what it means for small business, specifically for small business? Feel free to jump in.
Sure, I'll start. Well, good morning, everybody. Well, first and foremost, I think President-elect Biden made handling the COVID-19 pandemic central to his campaign and his comments in the past few days. We hope and expect that will extend to small businesses in the short term. That hopefully will mean additional and better financial relief, federal relief, that will cover the most vulnerable small business owners, especially minority and women-owned. We don't believe that Congress should wait until after the inauguration to pass legislation that will help small businesses, because small businesses really cannot wait any longer. In the long term, we expect to see a national plan to better manage the virus, which should help restore Main Street as consumers feel more comfortable going out into their favorite small businesses. And this will be crucial to the country's economic recovery because we cannot have a national recovery without a strong small business sector.
That's so true.
I'll go next, and I'll start by thanking you, Maneet, and our friends from Business Forward for the invitation to be on this panel. It's an honor to be with Luz and Jason. During my time at the SBA, I had the great privilege of working both with Accion and the Kauffman Foundation, so I'm very familiar and in admiration of their good work. Wow, what a week it's been, right? And we're so happy to be where we are at this time. And in my opinion, one of the most important things that we will see from the Biden-Harris administration is the fact that they acknowledge the importance of small business, and that I fully expect that their administration will demonstrate that from day one. As Luz said, one of the most important things is to make sure that as a nation, we have the leadership focused on getting this pandemic under control, because as long as that is raging, we are still going to suffer huge economic deleterious effect to our economy with a raging pandemic. And so I was delighted to hear the president-elect say that he's already worked on pulling a group of experts together. That has to be the place we start. And then I am also certain, because of having done some volunteer work on the economic policy team during the campaign, I am certain that the Biden-Harris leadership team will focus early and very intently on small businesses because they understand the importance as job creators and as the foundation of our neighborhood corridors, our Main Street corridors. We have to have small businesses either staying in the game, hanging in there, and having federal support to stay in business, or to reboot. We need to have that as a priority as well. So looking forward to the rest of our discussion, but I think the pandemic and then an intentional focus on small business recovery is what we can expect.
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, what we saw this spring and throughout most of the summer really was a large focus from federal policymakers and at the state and local level around the needs and challenges that new and small business owners face. That is something that I believe has been lacking for the most part on behalf of government for many years now, where the focus tends to be on those established businesses, the bigger businesses, and what they need. So for all the destruction and terrible things that COVID has brought, and there are very many of those, I think a silver lining has been, at least this summer, that we had a lot of attention finally from policymakers on entrepreneurship, on small business, and on the importance of these businesses to our communities and to our national economy. So that has to continue and to increase, really. And so I love what Marie says around developing a plan. I think being specific about the goals that you have for supporting new and small businesses is something that we need to see from a new administration. And that they put in place people at high levels who are empowered to take forward that agenda to make sure that all Americans who are currently operating a business are getting the support they need. And then long term, that we're addressing these inequities, long-standing inequities in access to entrepreneurship.
To that point, what are some of the things you guys are seeing small businesses experience at this moment? And how critical is the relief from the current health, economic, and racial equality crisis?
One thing I'll offer is I had the privilege of, I'm based in Washington, and I had the privilege of serving on Mayor Bowser's Reopen DC task force. And what I learned during that very intensive exercise was that small businesses really need, they need a number of things, but they need access to the cash and the capital that they need in order to keep their businesses open. They need access to customers. They need a customer base that is feels confident that they can go out and and interact with businesses in a safe environment, et cetera. I'll stop there. But the other thing that I think is really important to note, particularly in this season in our country where we have a heightened focus on economic disparity and the impact of systemic racism, the importance of the small business community for Black people and other minorities cannot be overstated. To have a strong business sector comprised of Black and brown business owners makes all the difference in terms of employment for those communities, in terms of stabilizing and strengthening those communities, giving people that first leg up, that first job experience to help them get on the ladder to economic health. Cannot say enough about how important having those businesses strong and thriving, how much it means to the entire economy, because it plays such a role in the role for the Black economy, the brown economy. And so what we have seen, though, during the pandemic is that those businesses, and particularly Black-owned businesses, have suffered tremendously.
Right.
And so what I'm also expecting from the Biden-Harris administration is that we won't gloss over that and try to do a peanut butter approach, but really send federal resources to where the problem is and make sure that those businesses get the extra measure of support that they need, because helping Black-owned businesses helps the entire economy. It helps all of our communities. It helps the entire country. So I'm hoping to see that that's part of the response as well, to really focus on where the true problems are.
Well, you read my mind. My next question was just going to jump into that with a stat from the Fed, which reported that from February to April, the number of Black businesses declined 41% compared to 22% for overall. And we know that 90% of Black-owned businesses are also sole proprietors. So the disproportionate significant challenges that minority businesses are facing is really stark. So what specifically would all of you like to see from the incoming administration to target this, to help these minority-owned businesses get back to being whole?
Well, I'm happy to start. I mean, I think, again, it begins with acknowledging the scale of the challenge and making a commitment to really addressing this. One of the things that I felt was a bit instructive with some of the challenges in the Paycheck Protection Program is, to me, it signaled in some ways a lack of understanding among some within government about what the capital needs are really for new and small businesses. When you look at the data, about 83% of entrepreneurs, when they launch a business, do not access bank loans or venture capital. But you think about what are the things that occupy most of our attention when we talk about capital, it's those two subjects. And so what are people using when they initially start a business? Well, it's their own personal wealth or their family savings, if they have any. But we know that there's a wealth gap in the United States as well. And so we need to find new and innovative ways to get capital to entrepreneurs, especially those who have traditionally been underserved by the current capital markets.
I agree. Luz, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to say, all businesses are not created equal, right? And the pandemic has hit different businesses in different ways. So you have businesses that really cannot afford a loan. They don't have the revenue. They don't have the capacity to pay it back. So what do they need? They need more initial infusion of a grant, equity. We know that equity per se is not readily available for the small businesses we're talking about. So grants are the next best thing. The other thing that we need to think about is technical assistance in financial advising. It has been proven that the combination of both responsible capital and technical assistance really can have an everlasting impact on the lives of these entrepreneurs in the local communities. And so I think that giving the small business development centers the resources and CDFIs to be able to provide and match the technical assistance with the capital and even grants is really, really important for the recovery.
And when you say technical assistance, are you referring to digital tools trainings for businesses that were the mom and pops that are now needing to transition online?
It's really all sorts of things, right? It's certainly digital tools. It's how to acquire customers. It's how to pivot. It's how to market your business. It's how to deal with landlords, legal, accounting resources. It's all the things that in a time of distress, small businesses need in order to better perform.
Right. There was a recent report that came out from the Connected Commerce Council that, to your point, Luz, said that businesses that had technical assistance and digital tools training and pivoted and leaned into that saw, I think, 400% more revenue during the pandemic than ones that didn't. So it's really the difference between, keeping the lights on and unfortunately not.
Yeah, exactly.
If I could add on to Luz's good point, Maneet, and that is in technical assistance, the other thing that, continuing on the theme of what to expect in the new administration, I mean, the Trump administration might as well have had a placard up saying, if you're not a white male, we really don't have use for you. I mean, the administration, the look of it, who was in power, who was leading the charge across so many different parts of the government, there just was no diversity, no sense of where to meet people where they are, where to have the government come in to help as opposed to perpetuate the inequities. And so what I do strongly, what I know we will see in a Biden-Harris administration is an administration that looks like America and looks like what we want to see. We want to see a diverse array of people from all kinds of situations, all kinds of backgrounds working on these issues. And that is also what's needed in technical assistance. We have different organizations who historically have been, I'm thinking about the SBA specifically right now, that have done very fine work over the years in providing technical assistance. But that's an area where we need to look to see how do we bring a broader array of experts to come into that network and to work with businesses on the ground. Just like one of the proud things that I was part of at the SBA during President Obama's administration was we expanded the network of women's business centers because we know so that it was nationwide. We know that when women are able to speak with other women about business needs and so on, that has an impact. That has great positive lift to women and their ability to continue and to grow their business. Same way with other minorities. People want to see people at least as part of the network, not to say that you can't learn from people who aren't just like you. I'm not making that point, but it matters for people to see a diverse set of advisors in a technical assistance framework. And that's something that I really will urge the administration to pay attention to.
Yeah, to your point, I just had a thought while you were speaking, and I know I'm the moderator, I'm not the panelist here, but could something like a national directory that on the SBA site of all the grant programs and technical resource options potentially be feasible? One of the things I keep hearing from small business owners and entrepreneurs that were really suffering during this pandemic is they feel like there's not enough transparency from the SBA. One such business owner, the CEO of Boll & Branch, which makes luxury bedding and arguably has been doing much better and was able to provide hospitals with bedding equipment, said even for him, it was difficult to figure out SBA loan agreements and there wasn't a lot of transparency there. So that's definitely one part of the equation that could be helped. But I wonder if there could be one central hub or resource that could provide these small business owners with, a directory of sorts, if that could be something, or maybe that exists and the word's just not out there.
Well, I agree with your point about transparency and awareness, and it's something that, and I promise not to keep going back to, the good old days, quote unquote, but the SBA can continue to do a better job, in my opinion, of being more transparent and building awareness, because there are parts of particularly the small business community that just don't know enough about what resources they can tap into at the SBA. and then how to do so. And so I think that that's just, and it's an opportunity. It's not a slam against the agency. There are some very fine, very dedicated, hardworking people at the SBA, and it was a privilege to be part of that effort. But I do think I'm someone who believes in looking for continuous improvement. And I think that's an area, and particularly during these times, that we have got to look for every way to bring the agency to the people, bring the agency to Main Street, so that business owners can tap into the resources that the agency provides.
Yeah, maybe one more thing that I'll add into this discussion that I think is very important we're having about technical assistance is that it's not just government agencies like SBA, while important, that do provide technical assistance. At the Kauffman Foundation, we fund dozens and dozens of nonprofits in communities across the country. And many of these organizations, if not all, are embedded in the community. The people who are working there and helping the entrepreneurs look like the entrepreneurs from the community who are coming in. And so there's, I think, an opportunity for government at all levels to direct funding to some of these organizations that are providing that on the ground assistance. And so we don't need to just rely on the government to do this. Government plays an important role in providing direct assistance, and we need to strengthen those efforts, improve the transparency and awareness of these resources. But I think there's also an opportunity for more funding to go to other organizations that have proven to provide high quality assistance and education to business owners.
Agreed.
To that point, with the PPP program, we saw with round 2, I think around 63 billion was earmarked towards CDFIs and other nonprofit organizations. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we all know the problems that happened with round 1 and 2 of the PPP program and the frustration small business owners had. But Luz, how important do you think it is for a renewal of the PPP program? And if so, are there changes that you would like to see to make it more potentially, hopefully more effective?
Sure. So, first, yes, there were challenges, but we also have to acknowledge that the amount of money that was deployed in PPP in a very short period of time was commendable, frankly.
Right. True.
So acknowledging that, I think that first and foremost, we need to redirect some of the unused funds that were originally targeted for large corporation bailouts and any unused PPP funds and redirect those funds to help small businesses.
Right. They didn't go back, right? They didn't go back. They went back into the treasury, but they weren't reallocated to small businesses.
Correct. Also, the relief that needs to be allocated, there needs to be changes to ensure that those most in need are getting the help and they're getting the right kind of relief. In the next round, we are hoping to see that there is an expansion of what the money can be used for, because small businesses right now are in a liquidity crunch. And, at the time when PPP was rolled out, it was effective again for some who were still open. But one of the drawbacks was that it was provided to cover 2.5 months of payroll. And when businesses are shut down, they don't need cash for payroll. So expanding the scope and purpose of the funding, so it goes into inventory, reopening, rebuilding, other expenses, is really, really important. And what's more important, 90% of Black-owned business owners are self-employed. They don't have a payroll, right? So the original PPP left out the vast majority from the outset at the beginning. And the funds need to be for what the business needs are, right? And then you have a lot of mom and pops that do not take out a consistent draw for payroll. So they were also disqualified. And, I can go on and on about the forgiveness now and how that's working, but I think we all get the gist of what some of the critical changes on the next round of PPP need to look like.
Right. And to your point, I spoke to one small business owner, and she said getting a PPP loan actually ended up hurting her. And she's one of the fortunate ones because 80%, to your point, had to go to payroll. So then it looked like she was working at an operating loss. And then she wasn't able to get a bank loan because of that to cover all of her business expenses. So it skewed things in a direction that wasn't 100% accurate. And it wasn't as helpful. She said it ended up hurting more than and it helped. But to your point, also very commendable, unprecedented amount of money went out the door. We just need to be able to do it better, and I think work faster. So one of the other things that surprised me during my reporting during round one was that not all banks are approved SBA lenders. How much is that a part of the problem? And again, I don't want to focus too much on the PPP, but if we required all banks to become SBA lenders, would that help move things along faster in terms of deploying capital to these businesses?
Certainly expanding the group of the landscape of SBA lenders would be a help. And in my opinion, though, that needs to the focus there needs to be more on what I would call mission lenders, more Accions in the mix, more CDFIs in the mix, because quite frankly, those lenders are often better finance partners for small business, particularly small Main Street businesses, because these are lenders who are closer to the ground. They understand the community where these businesses operate. They can do a much better job, a more nuanced job of really identifying what the risk factors are for a small business, and can just be a better partner. I know during the PPP, I had got calls from people I know who had longstanding relationships with large banks who were not able to get an audience for a PPP loan because they weren't big enough of a company and therefore didn't generate a large enough fee for the bank. And so a mission lender isn't, of course, they are businesses too, but they just have a more comprehensive approach to how to serve businesses, and often can provide technical assistance. To Jason's earlier point, technical assistance comes from a number of excellent partners in the private sector, and mission lenders can serve that role, the finance partner, but also can provide technical assistance to the small business. So to be more specific in answering your question, I think the SBA would be well advised to look at how to continue to see how to streamline their processes so that more smaller community mission-oriented banks would be interested in becoming SBA lenders.
And one last thing to that point, I was speaking to a well-placed billionaire source who has relationships with a lot of the major banks, and he was trying to figure out what was going on. And he said that they complained that during the financial crisis, the government said that they would make these banks whole, but at the end, they felt like they were left holding the bag. The bank said this in the early days as a defense. How much of that is rings true to you panelists, and how much of that do you think is the banks just looking for the bigger clients to get higher fees?
So I'll start, and I'll say that, there were a number of reasons why banks were concerned about PPP, right? Including first, understanding the program rules in a very short time frame, funding the loans, performing the know your customer compliance related issues, and just overall general capacity to process this huge number of new transactions in a very short time. So hesitance from the banks was understandable, given all the moving parts. And it further clarified that a majority of banks are simply not in the business of financing very small businesses. And there are gaps that are huge that exist, right? Now, regarding the 2008, time, in the case of government guaranteed small business loans, I'm not aware of any evidence that the banks were really left holding the bag. In fact, we saw a number of banks getting very aggressive with SBA-backed products prior to the crash. And to the extent that those loans were made according to the SBA guidelines, my understanding is that the SBA should have covered them. But I also think, when we talk about government-backed guarantees, those are not a panacea, right? They need to be very carefully crafted such that the products that are covered meet the needs of the populations that we're trying to serve with responsible capital, while also providing coverage for a reasonable level of risk for the lenders to take. And if the transaction is a small transaction, then there needs to be administrative fees that are adjusted upwards, relative to PPP, which were frankly very low, particularly for the smaller loans, so that the lenders are incentivized, right? Because these are very, very small loans. And last but not least, if the lenders who are willing to serve the target population are non-depository institutions, which most of them are, right? CDFI, minority depository institutions, et cetera, you may need to also identify and facilitate appropriate capital sources to enable those lenders to take advantage of the guarantees, because sort of a, catch-22, if you don't have the capital, what good does a guarantee do for you if you can't deploy loans?
Right. The banks needed to be able to make the math work on their own.
Right.
Yeah, and to Luz's point, I agree with everything you said. PPP was unprecedented in terms of the volume and just the rush of the volume and the constrained time period, et cetera, that everyone was working under. But I firmly believe whatever we choose to do, we can do. I mean, we know the answers to so many of these questions. We know what the small lenders need. We know what the non-depository financial institutions need. We know what gaps are out there. Either that, or we need to listen more to what the businesses are saying. Businesses aren't looking for a handout or welfare. These are people who've given everything to start a business. They have given their lifeblood to starting something new. So they're not looking to bilk the government. They're looking for support that they can leverage to get back in the game, to get back to producing and adding to the economy. And so my fervent hope and expectation is from the Biden-Harris administration is that they will understand, they'll have that lens on the issue, not small business trying to take something, but how does the government use its power to leverage resources across the spectrum, as Jason said, not just government resources, but bring everybody together to create the tools and the resources that these businesses need to get back on their feet and back to contributing. Washington, D.C., as an example, I'm very concerned about, since we have such a large part of our economy, the growth of the city has been driven by the phenomenal hospitality scene that we have, the great restaurants, the great, the great destinations that we have. That's what has fueled the resurgence of the Washington, D.C. economy. We need these small businesses back in the game. Our city would not be the same without them. And I'm sure it's the same story all across the country. So this needs to be a priority for the Fed, the new.
One quick follow-up for you, Maria, and then I'm going to switch over to Jason. You said recently that without strong federal action, as many as 2 million small businesses will permanently close as a result of the pandemic. What's your best guess on how much time we have to save these businesses? And what are some things, and this is for the whole panel, that we can do in the interim while we're waiting for that federal action? Because, I think this is an audience that is not one to really want to stand by and wait, and, would love to put some action in where we can.
I think, again, as where we started, the focus on controlling the pandemic as best we can, the focus on helping small businesses figure out how to make and for example, restaurants, how to create an outdoor experience as the inclement weather is we're facing the change in seasons, but also being clear-eyed that we're going to lose more businesses. I mean, there's going to be more companies who we're not able to save. So in my mind, that means we're going to have to think about recovery, bankruptcy, what kinds of changes need to be instituted for businesses that need to reboot. And that's not an area that I would certainly not consider myself an expert in. But again, I believe we're going to have to take a fresh look at how to help businesses come back from the ashes, those who are willing and have the capacity to do so with some support, because it's a good investment to get these businesses back on their feet. Ultimately, is going to be good for the economy. It's not charitable, but it's the right thing to do to keep our economy moving forward and keep people working.
Mm-hmm. So Jason, are there policy ideas in America's new business plan that you see a priority for the first 100 days? And to those in the audience, that's a new report issued by the Kauffman Foundation.
Yeah, correct. I just want to, before I get to that, Maneet, pick up
Mhm.
on a point that Marie made
Sure.
at the very end of her remarks, where she said that it's good for the economy. Absolutely so. I think our audience today probably understands that, but I'm going to underscore that point. New businesses, those that are less than 5 years old, are the primary source of nearly all net new job creation in the United States.
Mm.
If we don't have entrepreneurs, we will not have job growth in our community. So we have to figure out a way to support those businesses that are open now, the ones that are that will close, unfortunately, and who will seek to reboot, and for the people who are coming up with their own new ideas now. So to your question, yes, the Kauffman Foundation just over a year ago released a bipartisan policy platform called America's New Business Plan. And it includes a number of recommendations for government at the federal, state, and local levels around what they can do to help new and small businesses. And it's organized around 4 core needs that all entrepreneurs have. In coming up with this document, we spent time doing public polling, looking at the research, talking to nearly 50 experts in the entrepreneur community, all that informed the content of the plan. And what we heard consistently were these 4 things. First, entrepreneurs need opportunity. That means they need a level playing field and less red tape. That was one of the problems, I think, with PPP or any relief effort, is just the perception and reality of how much red tape does the entrepreneur have to go through. Making things simple and creating a level playing field with those bigger established businesses must be a priority. Second, we spent a lot of time talking about it on this conversation today. It's the issue of funding. We need to make sure all entrepreneurs get access to the kind of capital they need, no matter who they are or where they live in our country. Third, it's about the know-how needed to start and grow a business. This is where the technical assistance comes in that we've talked a lot about. And then finally, it's about supporting risk-taking. How do we create a better and more robust safety net in the United States to enable entrepreneurial risk-taking? One of the things we talk about in our plan is relief from student loan debt. I think that is something that you could see pursued in the first 100 days, along with this commitment that really needs to be made to closing gaps when it comes to capital access.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Luz, Marie, you two both also co-authored a report called Big Ideas for Small Business with a 5-step roadmap for rebuilding the small business sector. Does one of you want to take the lead and kind of walk us through some of those steps?
Marie, you want to start, or you want me to start?
Go ahead, Liz. I'll follow you.
Okay, so yeah, this report was really, it's a comprehensive analysis of small business policy that really, to my understanding, has ever been done in the U.S. And it provides a roadmap that the federal government can take in partnership with local and state governments, medical, educational institutions, and the private sector to help small businesses survive this crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we've talked about it here. This crisis has made abundantly clear that there is deep racial inequality in our country that affects the physical and the financial wealth and health of entrepreneurs of color. And because minority businesses operate with less capital, they're also more likely to fold under crises like we're just going through. So responding to these forces, I think the report laid out, very clear 5 steps. One, what I mentioned at the beginning, providing grant and loan programs that are appropriately scoped for the needs of the small business. Also, reducing barriers to entry for entrepreneurs, so these small businesses have the tools that they need to succeed, and also be able to strengthen antitrust laws and enforcement. The other part is building a financial system that works for Main Street by launching a new generation of federally backed debt and equity products, and by strengthening what we've all talked about here, community banks and nonprofit financial institutions that are in the community serving these small vulnerable businesses. Also, harnessing the power of public and private procurement to help build wealth in minority communities. And last but not least, something that's very dear to my heart, require the federal government to collect more data and better data on the small business sector, and to more rigorously evaluate programs that are working so that continuous improvement can happen.
Sorry, I interrupted. No, please continue.
No, I was just going to say these are big, bold, huge stats, but they're further broken down into 10 very specific policy recommendations and just a ton of specific proposals.
I would personally appreciate your last point about more thorough data about the small business sector. I was trying to do reporting and looking at data from the Census Bureau, especially for minority-owned businesses. It's very disjointed, and it's not an equal fair representation. And what ends up happening, at least from the media perspective, you can't get the word out properly because a lot of these surveys, which are commendable and great that these organizations are doing them, they're a very small subset of the community. It's a survey of 500, 1,000 businesses. We have 30 million small businesses in the US, and the government and the Census Bureau has the power, the full force of power to get us this data so we can see if the policies that are being put in place, if the programs that we're proposing can actually hit the nail on the head and get to the heart of the issue. But Jason, Marie, Luz, what can we do now while we're waiting for federal action? I guess from my personal perspective, what, other than getting the word out for customers to support small businesses, is there anything that we can do in the interim while we wait for another round of stimulus funding to get approved?
I think
if I could just say one thing about Luz, I thought you did a magnificent job of summarizing the work of the report very clearly and comprehensive. So I just want to applaud you on that. And I also wanted to say that I also agree that the data piece for small businesses is huge, because when there is data, it's hard to put a head in the sand, or it's harder anyway, to put a head in the sand and say, we don't know what to do. With data, it helps bolster the case for the hard work that's ahead for making tough decisions. In my view, when you have a president of the United States who I'm sure I can safely say, paid less taxes by a long shot than any of us on this call, and probably anyone listening in, that says to me that we need to look at federal policy to see, okay, how do we give some bit of an advantage to small businesses who are really out there working hard, creating jobs, keeping our communities stable and vibrant. We've got to make some decisions. If we give the lip service to the fact that these businesses matter and we want to see them return to our main streets, then we've got to have the policies in place to make that happen. And so that's going to include looking at everything from tax policy to what government agencies are doing across the board, because the recovery of small businesses is not just the issue from the government standpoint, not just the issue of the SBA. There needs to be a federal government-wide look at procurement opportunities, as Luz mentioned. That's part of our report, to ensure that all of the assets, the tools of the federal government can be used. As far as what we need to do now is we need to keep the pressure on right now with the government, as far as talking about these issues, demanding that small businesses get their fair share of the attention and the policy response. I can't say with any certainty what the response will be, but I think it's incumbent upon us as citizens to keep talking about how important these issues are, and that they demand a response from our federal government, but also other companies, large businesses and their procurement. We should challenge anybody we do business with. Ask them the question: what are you doing in terms of your procurement? How diverse a supplier base do you have, et cetera? We just need to keep the conversation going about looking at the small business sector and what we collectively can do together to help businesses either stay in business or return to business.
Yeah, policymakers like to say that small business is the backbone of the American economy. That's a good sentiment to share, but it needs to be backed by action. When you have data, and you have timely data, that helps your case. But you can't, I believe, just rely on data and research to move policy. You have to have the voices of those who are impacted at the table. So the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, the people who care about entrepreneurship have to be engaged. And I know that's a hard ask. Business owners are head down trying to build their business to stay alive and survive during this current time. But the more that their voice can be part of the conversation, the more likely it is that we will see policies change in ways that are helpful to entrepreneurs. And so one of the things I'm hopeful about as I reflect on the past week, when we had record numbers of Americans exercise their civic responsibility and go to the polls and vote, let's keep that momentum and that action, and let's translate it into sustained engagement with policymakers at all levels of government, so that they know what it is that new and small business owners need and that they are responsive to those concerns.
Mm. Well, we have some great audience questions and we only have about 10 minutes left. So if you guys are all okay, we'll transition over to get some of those questions. Okay, great. So the first question, small businesses need more than just funding support, especially entrepreneurs from minority communities. Not all small businesses can afford to build their own apps. What are the plans for creating online marketplaces? This is critical for not just surviving COVID, but long-term sustainability. What is the groundwork for that?
I think that's an excellent question and an excellent idea. And it's an example of how we just need to think more creatively about what kinds of tools can be put out there to help businesses apply their trade more effectively. I mean, I'm not, again, this isn't an area that I'm very conversant on, because I am going to expose a real weakness here, but I'm not much of an online shopper. So I'm not really familiar with that milieu, but I know that I am a rarity, a bit of a dinosaur in that regard, because everybody I know, they shop online. And so the notion of having more online marketplaces for small businesses to trade would have to be a very helpful initiative, particularly for the products side of small businesses. And so the questioner raises a very good point.
I don't know if I have a lot more to add as well, but just a thought. I know a number of communities have created these local brands for, like Made in Kansas City. We have in Kansas City a few stores, physical locations, where they sell a range of different products that are made by local entrepreneurs. And so that's a place that you can go, and you don't have to find each entrepreneur's store or their presence online, right? And so I think that's what the question is kind of getting at. How do we support these platforms where entrepreneurs can, in some ways have a better shot at competing with the big internet platforms and stores that are out there? And I think a lot of these communities just locally have organized around these kind of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, next question. Should the Biden-Harris administration explore the possibility of redefining the Small Business Administration to be truly focused on small businesses? The current definition of businesses with less than 500 employees is truly misguided.
Well, I'll give my 2 cents and then defer to my colleagues on the panel. I think that what would be useful for the agency is to figure out how to have a more stratified approach to how businesses are supported. Because it is true, if you have a business with 1 to 5 employees versus a business with 500 employees, are going to need very different, in many respects, are going to need different things. And so whether or not the 500 bogey should be revisited, not so sure, but definitely the agency would be well-intentioned to look at the programs that they have, and to figure out how to ensure that they are, again, more stratified depending on the size of the business. And that also relates to the, as we were talking earlier, building awareness, getting out to, taking the agency out to the people. That's very helpful and very important for those businesses on the very small end of the size spectrum.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I would just add as well, I think Marie's absolutely correct. I love the idea of the stratified approach. And I would include in that stratification the age of a business as well. Many times age and size can correlate, but there's also differences between a new business and a more established business. And so thinking about how does the SBA support not only small established businesses, but new businesses is important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. What are the top 3 suggestions to help Main Street attract local customers, not just restaurants and bars, but also other products and services?
I can start. You know, I think that we've seen a lot of businesses pivoting to digital tools, pivoting to other products. I think that, you know, basic things like having, you know, updated profiles on Google My Business, on Yelp, on all the types of social media, you know, updating your store hours. If you're opening, you know, letting people know what steps you're taking in order to protect the customers. I know these are very basic, right? But, you know, everybody that shops online today, or everybody that goes to a business, is using one of these tools. And so having up-to-date information is really, really important. I think hosting an event, you know, one of the things that COVID has done, it has sort of transformed the way in which we engage with customers. You know, it might not be a good idea to have an opening, you know, reopening celebration, but you may be able to, you know, have a digital social media event and you know, have your stories on Instagram, do a countdown, create a Facebook event page for your followers to you know, to RSVP. The other thing is switch up your content, right? You know, start focusing on building excitement for what you're doing, for the different changes that you've made, for getting people excited that, you know, this is small businesses that they need to support. You know, run specials, right? Do promotions. Try to gather information about your customers coming in, whether it's an email or a text, that you can then proactively reach out and, you know, offer a discount for the first 50 customers that come in, as an example. So be active in, you know, in promoting your business in different venues on social media.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. How can rural small businesses be included, especially when many rural areas don't have rural broadband?
That's a huge problem and needs to be part of the new administration's attention. I mean, we see, particularly in this time of pandemic, broadband should be part of the definition of universal service. It's just as important now to have broadband as it was to have a telephone landline, you know, 100 years ago. So that has got to change, because to the extent that rural communities do not have access to broadband, it stifles economic growth, it stifles education, it access to healthcare, so many critical things. So so that's top issue in my mind. But then managing in the current environment, I think that it's just a matter of using whatever internet capacity that you have to take some of the modalities that Luz suggested, and also referring to Jason in terms of building a sense of community around small businesses, getting the local government to host a space where businesses can come together, looking at partnerships and collaborations, like businesses coming together to show their wares and creating a marketplace of sorts. That, you know, just a time to try to be as creative as possible and use what you have to best advantage to support the business community.
Awesome. Any last thoughts from the panel before we wrap up?
Support local small businesses. For everyone listening in, and for all of us as panelists, that is the best thing that we can do right now to help our small business community and their employees.
Amen. I'm actually looking at a comment that says that pretty much says that verbatim. I actually got several comments saying that's the best strategy. Please buy local, especially during this holiday season.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we're all aligned on that front. Jason?
No, I think this was a great discussion. You know, Maurice talked about there needing to be a will, and I want to echo that. There are many good ideas out there. Big Ideas for Small Business is a great resource. America's New Business Plan is meant to be a resource to policymakers. There are many others as well, from informed folks who have worked for a long time on these issues. I think what we need now is a will, and a really for folks to come together around an issue that is not partisan, should not be partisan. This is something that is, I think, as American as apple pie, and we need to do more to support these entrepreneurs and small business owners in a very challenging time today and long-term moving forward.
You're here.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for joining us, and to all of our participants today. And another big thank you to Public-Private Strategies and to Tammy for organizing this event at Reimagine Main Street. Thank you guys all so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.